I can. So if you know anybody that,
I wish I could help you. I've got the same challenges you have right now.
yeah.
I've
Hey,
got what's that?
did you see? We should probably mention it on the call, but have you seen all the cyber attacks on health systems this past
No,
week?
I have not seen that.
So
we got people. Go ahead. Let's talk about that. The cyber attacks. I didn't see it.
yeah. So Ascension.
We've got people are starting to join in. Scott and I are just going to chit chat here about some recent events as we let people join the room. So, but Scott, you just mentioned there's a bunch of cyber attacks on health systems.
Yeah. So Palomar Health was impacted. I think they're out in California, and then Ascension had a breach.
Wow.
Yeah. Shut down patient care. This was like this week.
Wow. Yeah. So, I tend not to pay a whole lot of attention to the news. It's not not fun anymore, but I should. But wow, that's these are wow.
These are big health systems. I mean, you figure Ascension's one of the biggest in the country.
With huge IT teams protecting their data, right?
So apparently, Biden's the administration is coming out with some new cybersecurity standards that they're going to enforce on hospitals as a result of this. So between that, Change Health,
wow,
it's pretty crazy.
I mean, and I don't know about, well, we talked about this, but just 2 weeks ago, the FDA change with laboratory developed tests in the diagnostic space. That's you want to talk about for the MedTech industry or a segment of it, man, that's going to have a long tail of an impact on that one.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of changes that are going on right now, which is, same story, different day. Everything is constantly changing. But these are some big differences. So. These
are some huge ones. I mean, the LDT stuff, I mean, we've been talking about it for 10 years now, and it's finally, I mean, we should be ready for it, but I'm sure we're not.
Well, that's kind of the thing is you're playing chicken with regulation. When is it actually going to come into play? So
you're playing chicken with that's almost and this is a whole nother discussion, but it's in the conversation we're talking about. Oftentimes I deal with companies that are waiting for regulations to come out in order to help get them a boost in the marketplace. You want to talk about, that's another way to play chicken, but in the reverse direction.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're going to give people a couple more minutes to log back to join us today. Lindsay, my marketing guru, tells me we have the best sign up so far. So hopefully a bunch of people are joining us today. I'm sure they are. But let's give them a couple more minutes. Anything else top of mind we want to chat about, Scott, before we actually dive into the topic for the day?
No, I'm just looking forward to the overall topic. I think that's.
Yeah. So I have something top of mind. So anybody that's joining us as a kid that has a kid in college graduating today, congratulations.
Yeah.
I happen to be one of them. I'm immediately leaving this call, jumping in the car and driving to my son's. And something that's kind of interesting. This is kind of just a fun fact. Mm-hmm. This is the graduating class that didn't have graduation coming out of college. So for this year, graduating from college is going to be really the first graduation for these kids, which is, I'm excited for my son and for myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congrats to him and to you too.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and really good news for me is he's got a job already.
See, there you go. So now you can stop paying out for college. That's a win. So
it's a big transition, and he's my only child. So I'm a complete. I guess there's two stages of empty nester. One when they go off. The second one is when they're completely economically independent.
Yeah, I have four young kids. My oldest is 12, and my youngest is 4.5. So I'm thinking about what college is going to run when that happens.
Yeah, well, you want to talk about? I mean, that's kind of parallels with our discussion of today of an economic downturn.
Yeah, right.
Okay, Lindsay's telling us it's time we can dive in. We got a bunch of people already here today. So So just first of all, Scott, I mean, we've been chit-chatting, but it's wonderful to have you back again. If for those of you that have remember Scott and I back in, I think it was November when we last, and we had so much fun, and he's been gracious enough to come back and want to do it again. So here we are. So Scott, first of all, and just for reminder, Scott leads a medical marketing firm called Gyrus Marketing, MedTech marketing guru. And Scott and I have a lot in common, so we love having these discussions together. We're kind of birds of the feather type of thing. So Scott, welcome back, first of all.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And, you and I do this pretty regularly, and it just so happens that we're recording this one. So this is fun.
Oh, that's right. That's Scott and I get together on a regular basis too, just to beat around topics. And that brings me, so the topic for today, this actually was basically, I'm going to interview Scott today. This was a blog that he wrote that I read, and titled "Growing a MedTech Company in an Economic Downturn." And he had some really good advice in there. So I said, hey, why don't we do our next LinkedIn Live around that? And here we are. So So I thought that'd be a great topic. So that's what we're going to do. And just to kind of step back on that. So if I remember correctly, actually I do remember correctly because I read it recently. There's kind of two things you do in the blog post. One was talk about some macro trends that have been going on in healthcare. Yeah. And then the second piece was to kind of think about, and those macro trends leading to the challenges we're all, many of which we just added two more today, right. IT hack, and also the LDTs, and the recent FDA announcement around regulating LDTs. But you talked about some longer going trends. The other thing you talked about was then. You gave us 5 tips or ideas of things we can do to kind of compete when it's challenging times. Like, it seems like, I don't know about you, but I mean, for the last 10 or 15 years, it's been constant challenging times in the MedTech life sciences field. Don't you feel that way?
I absolutely do. I mean, I think the things that we're feeling today started at least a dozen years ago. Yeah. And truth be told, they probably started more like 15 to 20 years ago, because I know that because I literally started a role. I was at Medtronic for about a decade between that and Covidian. And I had a job for 3 years from 2012 to 2014, looking at the changes that were happening in the acquisition of medical technologies, what the buying process looks like, that sort of thing. And, that started in 2012, and those issues had already started prior to that. So I think what we're seeing is it's not a change in that, the economy goes up and down. We don't have that same, volatility in healthcare that folks do in other industries. What we have is these big mega changes that just take a long time to play out. But when they do, it is impactful, right? And that's kind of where we are, I think.
I agree. And I've, so I mean, if I go way, way back to the beginning of my career, now we're talking 40 years ago, 35 years ago in the healthcare space. And when I first started selling in the healthcare space, I think this along the lines of what you're talking about. I mean, we sold primarily on clinical benefits.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we closed deals, we get customers, we scale business on clinical benefits. And then, I think the timeline you're talking about is when we start seeing that pretty consistent shift from, particularly the economic benefits and the shift to, our healthcare system is way too expensive. We've got to, and everything started being managed against the economic benefits as the clinical benefits, as well as the clinical benefits. So I think that's kind of, but one of the things you were saying to me when we were, and I love this, your comment about this was that you're actually surprised by your clients that are surprised by these trends today. Still, they're struggling with products, either whether it be product launches or existing products, and they're struggling with these trends that have been going on for 10 or 15 years.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, a lot of us grew up in MedTech, and maybe we've been in it for 20 years, maybe for 40 years, right? You name it. But we grew up in this world where like Dr. Smith wants this widget, and therefore like it just happens.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of nostalgia for that, and like just not really wanting to necessarily turn that corner, because it's a challenging sales environment if you're really willing to kind of take a look at the three parameters that we generally think about when it comes to getting a device into a health system or into an office. The clinical piece is an absolute requirement. You have to do it.
Yeah.
And I
love that, because the clinical piece is kind of, it's a requirement just to get your toe in the door. It won't close the deal anymore. But go ahead. I think you're going to talk about the other two that are required.
Yeah, and so the other two that we think about are financial, so like the dollars and cents, the ROI.
Yep.
And then the final thing is operational, like the workflow. And I don't know about you, Chris, but I kind of feel like what happens is there's like an exhaustion of, okay, we just developed this product, we ran clinical trials, we went through FDA, and like we put all this money and effort into it. Isn't that enough?
Yes.
And so then the other two get short shrift, right? It's like we have a clinical story, and they're just not building out the other piece of it.
It's funny you say that, because and our marketing folks are telling us to do a poll. We'll do that in a second. We see it run up on screen. But that's a funny thing you mention that, because not only is there that exhaustion, but we also have this big celebration when we get it through FDA, like we've accomplished something.
Yep.
And you and I work in similar spaces, but I focus in on early market entry stuff completely.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, you're not even, you've just under the game. You've
gotten to the starting line, right?
You've got to the starting line, basically, and we're celebrating like we won.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of that exhaustion plus this celebration. It's like, oh, we're there. And no, you've still got the hardest part of the job, you just hit the starting line, and you're about ready to start a marathon here.
Yeah.
So I think you're dead on with that.
And it's interesting too, because like, again, if we think back to, 2006, right? Just picking a date out of the air, let's say 2004. So it's, 20 years ago. Physicians were still independent, right?
Yeah,
let's say that we have a widget that is being sold we got a knee implant, right? So something like that. We're going to go to Dr. Smith, and he's going to go to the hospital administration and say, get this for me or else I'm out. And then we fast forward to today. Dr. Smith now works for the hospital system, right? His compensation is tied to the overall performance of the health system. Because again, think 401ks for hospital systems, right? If you're an employee, you're in that. So you're actually tied to the performance of the health system. And so now like the advocates that used to hand you water and like tell you, go fight some of your fight in that marathon are now, they still want the product, but they're less willing to go out and lean out to say, yes, I'm going to go and put my name on the line to demand something.
And they don't have the gravitas that they did back then.
Right.
And they controlled where their patients were going back then, right? Because they were independent.
Yep.
Now they don't. They're employees.
Right.
To a large extent. So they don't control that stuff anymore. So not only are they less willing to put their neck out, but it's also risk, and the reason they're less willing is because it's riskier, because they're now an employee instead of independent.
Yep.
And they don't have the threat. They don't have the power to be able to do it anymore.
Yeah. And I think we've seen too, like just building on that, we've seen value analysis become a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like there's like ASVAP is the American Society for Value Analysis Professionals, right? There are people that are a part of a society that are talking about how do we do a good job on managing both the clinical and the financial side of allowing products into the health system. And I mean, they're doing great work, but if all you're used to and the only thing you've ever done is focus on the clinical benefits of my widget, and you haven't thought through the financial side of it, you're going to get you're going to get put to the wood chipper. Like it's just, you're asking for trouble, right?
And it's funny. So I still see, I mean, I work with all startups mostly, or people launch that. And they still, and companies are still not addressing the economic issues early on. They're still not, they're still focused on product development in the early stages. And there's, there is some shift, but it's not, there's a shift to understanding the value proposition, the customer earlier, the customer discovery stuff, the iCore stuff. But we're not this thing around building the economic models out of the gate.
Right.
And, the other thing that, this is kind of mind-boggling, but it's how MedTech is different than any other industry. Any other industry, they're doing this stuff because if you're in a capitalist system, you can't just pay attention to the non-economic benefits. It's actually for healthcare, it's been a luxury, maybe if you want to call it that, but it's also made us lazy in both our thinking and our actions. And I think that's where we're put. Let's do a quick poll here. So my marketing team tells me that to get, this is actually a LinkedIn hack, but that we should be doing polls and getting people to respond. But actually, it'd be a really good, it'd be great to get feedback from the audience. So can you put up the banner again? There we go. Let's do a quick poll. The other banner on the poll of how the market. There we go. This is the one we want. So people that are, folks that listen in today, tell us what you think of the current economic environment in the MedTech and the healthcare market. And just give us, put in the chat 1, 2, or 3. 1 for smooth sailing. Everything's going great here. 2 is it's a challenging environment. And 3, it's downright terrible. So, 1, smooth sailing. 2, it's challenging environment. And 3 it's downright terrible. Just give us a read on how you feel in your company, or what, and whatever you're doing, what's the economic market in MedTech these days. Scott, let's move on. Let's get on. So in your post, and this is a great discussion on how we got here, where we kind of are, the challenges of selling into a MedTech life sciences market. I mean, I'm sure we're all feeling this. But the meat of your blog post was what we can do in the face of these headwinds. Smooth sailing, right? Right. We're still in the sailing analogy here, or whatever we want to call it. So why don't let's get into this, because I think that's kind of the meat for me. Not the woes about where we are and how we got here, but how can we do better? The first one, and I loved it, was you wrote, adapt your value propositions more effectively to address your prospects' challenges. When I'm launching, this is the number one problem I see with startup companies launching, is they really don't understand what's the specific challenges of the customer that their product addresses. Actually, I just had a 2-hour discussion this morning with a client, and that's what we focused on, was what's your customer's problem. But tell me, when you wrote the blog, what were you thinking about this? And when you're dealing with your customers, what were you thinking about here?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to focus on the value, like the things that my widget can do from here's what I see, it's doing. But if any of us are familiar with like Clay Christensen, Innovator's Dilemma, right? Harvard professor, right? His whole idea is people don't buy a drill, they buy a hole in the wall. And so it's really a translation effort to say, okay, what are we doing from the vantage point of the customer, right? Or the prospect, and how are we telling our story in their language, so they're thinking about it. And that's what we've got to do, is make that translation. And then the other thing that we have to do, Chris, that we haven't mentioned yet, is if we go back to 2004, it was us selling across the table to Dr. Smith, and then he would go and make the magic happen. Right. Today, across the table from us is Dr. Smith. There's someone from finance. There's probably someone from supply chain, right? You've got a GPO contract to worry about. You've got someone in ops who's worried about workflow, right? You have all these different constituents.
IT's always in there today.
IT, thanks to the, jerks that are hacking all the health systems. But there are all these constituents that, number one, we've never had to talk to before. And number two, we don't know what they care about. And so as we think about how do you get out of this transition, again, this downturn is not a small period of time.
Right.
This is what the industry is, and it's going to continue in this way. We have to figure out, what does IT care about, right? Yep. And why do they care about it? I mean, we've seen literally, we've got a big MedTech client that everybody on the call would know if we mention them. And they have had deals get torpedoed by IT.
Sure.
Because their systems are connected to to the EMR. The EMR is sacrosanct at this point. And so if the CIO comes in and says it doesn't meet our cybersecurity standards, the deal is done. It's not going to happen.
So how do you overcome that? So tell me, how do you, well, I guess the better way is, how are you coaching this client to overcome that?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One, like in the development process, you need to actually go out and talk to some of these folks, right? And it's hard. You don't have relationships with IT maybe necessarily, but
but I got to tell you, a big company, I don't know the company you're talking about, but a big company like that has long-term relationships in these hospitals, strong relationships. They can get access to these people if they do the diligence and take the time to do it. Yes.
Yeah. I would tell you, small companies can do the same darn thing. Like, you may not be able to drop the, like, hey, I am this organization. You know who we are. You're already buying tens of millions of dollars from us. But people will share their opinions. That's one thing that's very true. Everybody has an opinion. They love to talk about themselves. So when you're doing that, you can get it.
I find that when you treat someone like an expert, it kind of teases their ego, right?
Yeah.
And they like to be treated as an expert, and they like, and then they'll even, they love sharing their opinions.
Yeah. And so I think that's the intake piece, is just reach out and ask people, and maybe you have to pay them for their time. But, if we think about the investment of a couple $1,000s to get some market research done versus $10 million to develop a medical device, like, it's not even a question.
But also, and I agree with you 100%, that $10 million to develop it versus what, 25 or 50 grand to do some basic market research.
Right. Yeah.
But then also, but it's just not the $10 million, but it's also they launch and they struggle, which means now they got, on top of that, the sales and marketing resources, so they're being wasted on. This is
and they have investors who are like, you guys are not hitting your growth curve. And it's like, well, no, duh. Like, you didn't do the homework up front. And I don't want to be rude to anybody, but like, that's the reality of it, that's the homework up front.
And this is where the laziness comes in, that we've been in the medical field, we've been treated. We just have to nail the clinical value proposition and the clinical benefits. We have to do the clinical studies to show it, and then we can go sell through our docs.
Right.
Those days are long gone.
Yeah. And so that's the intake piece, is you need to understand who are the people sitting across the table from you and what do they care about.
Yep.
And then the other thing that we have to think about is, how do we use technology to be able to get in front of the right people? So here's what I would say. If you've got a complex sale, let's assume that we're not selling Band-Aids to, urgent care clinics. We're selling some sort of technology that has multiple constituents.
Yep.
For each of those people, we'll just focus on CIOs because they're kind of a hot item right now. They have 10 to 15 micro decisions in the process of making the macro decision of bringing your widget into the system.
Yep.
Right. You can know what those things are. They will tell you. And so then as you start to think about what you do, is you want to say, all right, I got 10 to 15 decisions that the CIO is going to make around cybersecurity and integration and this and that and the other thing. How am I going to convey my story of how I'm serving them through a variety of mechanisms? Because you may not have rep access, so you may need to go to email campaigns. You may want to think about, what are you doing from a social media standpoint? How are you getting in front of these people to educate them in a way that changes the way that they see the problem and sees you as a colleague and a supporter of their goals, as opposed to another issue to deal with.
Right. So this is shifting us from being reactive in the sales process and marketing process to being proactive, right? And starting to solve the problems of all the stakeholders, even while we're in product development and figuring this out, we start figuring out so in this case, the CRO's chief information officer, figure out what his key concerns are, right? Figure out what his challenges are, figure out how to address those challenges, And actually, if we're really proactive, we start solving those problems for him. So now we come into him not as another thing for him to do today, something that he can put his, I've got my plates full and push up, but I actually come in and say, listen, I'm not here to give you something to help you. I'm here to help solve problems for you type of thing.
So I, at one point in my career, I was running innovation for a large hospital system, and I regularly interacted with the CIO of this health system and the chief nursing officer and chief quality, like all these great people that many of our listeners may think are trying to are obstructionists to keeping their products from getting in. And I will tell you, these are some of the best, most driven, sort of from a good way, like they're amazing people.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, people are just approaching them from the wrong angle.
Yeah.
So many of us are familiar with sort of the story brand concept of how you market. Oh, here's story brand in a nutshell. You are not Luke Skywalker, right? Yeah. If this is Star Wars, you are not Luke Skywalker.
Right.
You're Yoda, right? And Luke Skywalker is your prospect or your customer. And so you want to think about how are you serving them to solve their goal, as opposed to it's your success. And so then as we think about why people are being obstructionist, we used to get beat up because I had people that would be on the value analysis committee, for example, and like suppliers would be like, this is crap. You guys are just coming in and like just making life hard. I'm like, dude, you're doing it to yourself. Yeah. You haven't done the homework. We're an open book. You know what's important to us, and you're not doing the homework to figure that out, to come in educated, to be able to get the yes quickly. It's your fault. So spend the time and then tell the story the way that's going to help us see how this is going to make our lives better, not your life better. So
right. Cool. Yeah. So and this was your second one is look at beyond the clinical benefits, which is what you've been talking about.
Yep.
So here's you had another one in your blog, and I absolutely love this one.
Mm-hmm.
Is to grow your prospect pool and broaden your outreach without expanding the size of your team.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the first part of this. Grow your prospect pool and broaden your outreach. Tell us what you mean by that.
I'll give you a quick story, right?
Cool.
So we helped an Israeli EKG company commercialize here in the U.S.
Yep.
So they came to us. They were having success in Israel. They wanted to break into the U.S. market. They had like a guy who was the chief sales officer, and they wanted to outsource the whole marketing. And so that's kind of what we do. We're like a fractional marketing department. So we came in, and their strategy was in Israel, they had success going to like Jerusalem General Hospital and Tel Aviv Memorial, whatever, right? Go to the big health systems,
got it,
department chairs, and then that propagates down. And what we said was, that's cool. We can go after those people, but let's democratize it and let's get it out to all of the cardiologists in the United States and serve up, advertising to them in a way that they can engage to then ask for a demo. And let's go one step further, because in the U.S., right, when it comes to heart failure, a substantial percentage of those patients are treated by primary care docs, right, especially in rural settings.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And so we said, let's go market to all of those people using technology digitally to then see who raises their hand. And what happened, Chris, was it wasn't the guys at Cedars-Sinai.
This wasn't a market strategy yet. You just proposed, let's do some experiments and tests and see what we find.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way you approached it.
Yep, exactly.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and what happened was it wasn't Sloan Kettering and Kaiser and that adopted it. It was like primary care docs in West Des Moines, Iowa, that were buying these products, one call, like 15 minutes. What does it do? Great. I'll buy one of them. And then they would that's how they had this incredible growth path, because they said, hey, here's what we do. And the people that were really hungry for those solutions immediately raised their hand and engaged with it. And so it's a different model, right? Like, let people who really want what you have raise their hand and then engage with them.
Right. Let's experiment. But the key thing to this, and with respect to the point you were making in your post, was go look outside where you're selling today to see where other opportunities lie in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you already have But the other thing I think that is brilliant in this is that if they had stayed on that path, the path they knew instead of this experimental idea.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, first of all, you tested that path as well in your work,
Mm-hmm.
and you found that they didn't raise their hand,
right?
And that so you found a more willing buyer, or a more value, or a more responsive value proposition buyer type thing.
Yep.
But you also, the other thing that's brilliant in that is you greatly reduce their sales cycle.
Dramatically. Yeah. We did get them into some of these marquee accounts that everybody's chasing, right? I don't even need to mention their names. But
how long did it take to get into the marquee accounts?
It ended up being more like 6 to 9 months to get into the marquee accounts, which is
for these rural accounts, what was your average sales cycle there?
I mean, like 15 minutes, Chris. Like it was.
Oh my goodness,
dude! I'm telling you, like that's and this was kind of a unique period of time, and value proposition, that sort of thing. But like, there are people that really want what you have,
yes,
and will go and champion it. And I think about like for example, I was with Medtronic, and I launched an insulin pump back in the day, and not surprisingly, what happened? This was like 2008, 2007, 2008, and what happened was all the reps would get this new product, and they go to like their favorite accounts.
Yeah.
Right. And so then like it takes time to go through the process and all that. And they go to their secondary and their tertiary, and like they kind of grow out that way. And it's like, well, that's great. But what if that tertiary account that you have is super hungry for your product?
Yes.
Right. Rather than waiting a year to get to them, let them raise their hand and say, yes, I want it in today. And yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, if you're growing a MedTech company, you got to get revenue, and every dollar is green, right? So,
and I got to tell you, and so what are your options here? You're selling into your existing markets, working. You got this product, so you got two choices. Either you keep hammering away and competing, which is probably a highly competitive space if your existing product. Number one. Yep. The other thing is develop a whole new product. Now you got to sell into that same space. Mm-hmm. Or look, and for this one, is take that existing product and look for other opportunities with it.
Right. Yeah,
so. Let's jump on to MedTech market sales. This one. Here you go. So another one on your list, and we don't have too much time here, but let's just explore this one, because I think this might be the shortest path to have an impact today. But the way you wrote it was maximize every sales opportunity by penetrating deeper into existing accounts and relationships.
Yeah.
Tell me what you're thinking there. By the way, I love this one because I think this might be the shortest path to having additional opportunity, to having an impact on sales. But go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think as an industry, we have a focus on marquees, right? Did I get Mayo? Did I get Cleveland Clinic? How many logos do I have up on my website? And what I'm trying to say here is over and over again, we've got 50 clients in and around the MedTech space. Like we see this all the time. And one of the consistent things that I've seen throughout my career is a focus on getting new logos, as opposed to saying, hey, what percentage of the cases in St. Somewhere do we have?
Yes.
And how do we go? And if you have a medical device in, you pick your field, you probably have numerous providers that are prescribed or could use your product. And so how are we going and getting all of those folks on board? And then how do we make sure we're getting all of the indicated cases for those providers? And so you can survive as an early stage startup. You can survive off of a small handful of accounts if you can get deep and broad and own that space. To me, that's what I mean is like, how do you make sure that you're owning everything?
No, I agree with you. And it's, a kind of analogy is you go into a hospital and you get one doc and he's using your stuff in surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think this might be the easiest path is you already have credibility in that. First of all, you've navigated the sales process already, so you don't have to re-navigate that, right?
Yep.
You already have credibility, so you have internal references, right? And typically we're already moving on to the next thing instead of questioning where are there existing opportunities inside of, or if it's not surgery, you've got one, you're in the ICU. Can you take what's going on in the ICU and move it out into the general beds? There's all sorts of opportunities there, but you already have this existing trust and credibility inside that account. And you know how they operate it, that expanding is much easier than bringing on new clients.
Absolutely. So, yeah. I mean, if you think about just like the value analysis committee process inside, right? Like, how long does that take? What if you didn't have to do that? Like,
you don't have to repeat that.
Yeah.
You've already been through it. You don't have to go through that again. So,
yeah. Exactly.
Well, I think we need to wrap up. Scott, what a great discussion. Hopefully we've left people with one or two things to think about. In their daily, sales and marketing efforts that are going to make an impact, particularly if they're struggling and they're having a hard time out there in the marketplace. Anything you want to leave us with, Scott?
Well, I just wanted to say I really appreciate everything you're doing, Chris. Specifically, I really like the fact that you're actionable, right? Like all the advice that you're giving, everything is actionable about you can go and take this and do something with it. So I think, I think it's really cool. I
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're in a startup, and this may be different than in big companies I've been working with, everything has to be actionable. If you're not, you're going out of business tomorrow. So it's kind of in my DNA at this point.
I would say just a couple of parting thoughts, because I know we got to wrap up. Like, number one, take the time to understand all the people that are sitting across the table. Right. Yeah. So it's not just the clinician, it's probably IT, it's certainly finance, supply chain, like understand what their needs are and how you solve for those.
And understand them early in your product development process. That's the other thing I will add, but go ahead.
Yeah,
number one.
Yeah, I think that's number one. Number two is to think about how do you leverage technology to make the process easier. So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing away or minimizing the value that the sales team has. They're every bit as valuable, but how do you use technology to help them be more efficient? Because that's, from a P&L standpoint, best thing to do. From an adoption standpoint, best thing to do. Yeah. And then number three is do something with it, right? So we're shooting this on Friday, the 10th of May. It's Mother's Day in 2 days. And then it's Monday, the day after that. So you can do these things starting on Monday or even later.
Right. So think about over the weekend and take some action on Monday.
Yep.
By the way, that second one, using digital tools to get access to the right people with the right message. I think we could do a whole 30 minutes or more on that one. So okay. Visit us at Agile Market Entry on LinkedIn and like us there. And then join us the next one it's May 31st. It's right on here. We're going to be talking all reimbursement. I'm going to have a battle royale with Kim Norton, a good friend of mine that works on other projects. And we're going to talk about what's more important than the launch of a technology, a new MedTech device. Is it reimbursement or is it sales? Is it revenue or is it getting reimbursement lined up? Kim and I are going to battle that one out. You can guess what the outcome's going to be, Scott. I won't tell everybody right now. We'll let us battle it out. So, Scott, thanks again. It's always fun doing this with you, and look forward to doing it again. And everybody have a great weekend.
Yep. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Chris.